which is also a setting in Zoom that you can turn on. And I think at this point in time, I have enough direction about the question that always comes up, which is, can I record my lessons with my students? That's a question that's been coming up a lot. And we finally have a little bit more definitive answer on that, which is the answer is yes. But there is an expectation that you do not have any video, picture, or voice of your students in the recording, which you're thinking, how would I do that? Because they ask questions. So I think there's a lot of pre-work with that, just having the students understand that when you are recording your lesson, there will be time for questions afterwards that they can ask, and then you can pause or turn off the recording at that time. But there is also a way that you can record only your shared screen. So it's not recording the gallery of students. So it's only recording what you are sharing. And if you are the one talking, it will only record you as the little picture in that screen. So if the students aren't asking questions that they know not to, you can do your delivery, hit stop, and then you can engage the students in an interactive way at that point in time. But yeah, that's the direction we're getting from HR right now is recording is fine. Just make sure you don't have students in the recording. So, okay. Okay, getting back to this particular session, we're going to be going through the settings. Those are default settings for when you set up a meeting, and those are default settings for when your meeting is going. And the default settings for when you set up your meetings can be toggled. So they're just set that way when you go to a blank meeting screen, but you can change them however you want. In the in-meeting settings, there are some that have to be on to activate certain features when your meeting is going. And I'll point those out to you as we go through. And then if you're sticking around for the next session at 11:45, we'll be talking about those settings in detail while the meeting is going, like how to manage your meeting at that point in time. Okay, so, and I'm Mark, by the way. Hi, Mark Elliott, Chief Information Officer for the school district, Tech Director guy, and typical Zoom trainer. And if you have any questions about Zoom, just shoot them my way. If you have any questions while the training is going, you can either drop them in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask away. This session does count for technology PD for staff. We don't have the PD loaded into Skyward yet. So if you just write down on your calendar or jot down somewhere today's date, the title of the session, there's no PD enroller number, and the amount of time that you spent here, you can enter that time into Skyward when it is loaded for you for your PD, okay? All right, I'm gonna be in shared screen most of the time. So it does take me 1 second to get reset once I go to shared screen. One more second. Okay. All right, so at this point in time, you should see my portal page, correct? All right. So this is the My OSD portal. We want students to come through this to get to any of the resources at the top, whether it's Gmail, Schoology, Zoom, that kind of stuff. We hope you do the same. Reason being is that once you log into the portal, it also logs you into these other services. So it's just an easy way to get there. What I would like to point out here, first of all, is this is a way you can get to Zoom through the portal. I would also like to point out this distance learning toolbox, which I assume you're all familiar with because you made it to this training. But if you click on this, this is the calendar, where the calendar is for the different trainings. But I also like to point out the links here to the different tools that we support. Since we're in Zoom, I'll point out the video tools link. If you click that, it shows the 3 different video tools that we support in the distance learning toolbox. If you click on Zoom, it takes you to a page that has Zoom specific materials to it. So this is a great resource for you. If I don't answer a question or you have a question about something down the line, you can come in here and take a look at these things. They're a little old, they're from last spring, and Zoom has made a lot of changes, so we do need to update. The other thing worth pointing out is that there is a document here of how to connect your document camera to Zoom. So if you do have your document camera from your classroom at home, or you are in your classroom and you want to use your document camera, you can look at the model of your document camera, and in this document here, find the corresponding instructions for that. Okay. Back in the portal, to get to your Zoom account, if you click the Zoom link at the upper left, it will take you into your meetings tab for Zoom. You should be able to see either your initial or your picture up here or anything like that. And one of the first questions that always comes up is, when I'm in a Zoom meeting, people see a black background with my white name right there, not my profile picture. Why is my profile picture not there? That just means you are not logged into Zoom. So if you go through the portal, you are logged into Zoom and then your profile picture shows up. It should be up here in the upper right-hand corner. Any meetings that you have scheduled will now show up in this meetings tab. And as of Monday today, they completely changed how this whole thing looked. So if you've been here before, you now notice this looks very different. So Zoom has been making lots of changes. Across the top, you have tabs that say upcoming, previous, personal room, and meeting templates. We'll focus on pretty much just the upcoming one in a little bit, but and these are your scheduled meetings, but if you do go to previous, you'll see a listing of all of your other meetings that you have done in the past. We won't be talking about personal room, and I'll just touch on templates at the end. On the side here, you have profile, meetings. You probably don't have webinars. You have recordings and settings. You also do not have this admin area. This is on my account. And we are going to spend most of our time in settings. So we're going to go through the settings portion. And if you have your page open, you can go along with me. That's totally fine if you kind of want to have them side by side. But when I click on settings, you will see that there is a tab for meeting settings, recording settings, and telephone settings. We're not going to worry about telephone settings. I will touch briefly on recording settings, but we're going to spend our time on the meeting settings. Okay. So the first set of settings in Zoom are all about security. And this is, they've broken this out as its own set of settings. It didn't used to be last spring. So it's worth paying attention to here, because one of the things that came up with Zoom was the whole Zoom bombing thing. That happened real quick last year when we started to shut school down. So a number of security settings have come into place, and these are the places where you can turn them on or off by default. So first of all, the waiting room. I highly recommend that you have the waiting room on for your sessions with your students, okay? The waiting room is like a foyer where people have to line up, and then you can look them over and grant them access to your class. It's a great way to put eyes on who it is that is attempting to make it in. And I believe by September 27th or 30th or something like that, you will be required to have the waiting room on or a passcode for your meeting, or both, but you will have to have one or the other. Right now, you could turn them both off if you wanted, but that change is coming, just so you're aware. Okay, so I do recommend having the waiting room on. If you had a huge list of people waiting to get in and you don't want to take the time to look them over individually, there's a way that you can let them all in at the same time. Under waiting room options, if it is on, you can indicate that everybody goes to the waiting room, and if you can customize your waiting room. And by customizing your waiting room, you can actually change what it says when people come to the waiting room. So when you came to mine, it just said, this is Mark Elliott's waiting room, or whatever it is. But you could actually put a welcome message there. And what I've seen other people do is say, if you've been in the waiting room for 5 minutes, have a way that they could get a hold of you. Like if you've been basically stuck in the waiting room because I haven't noticed that you're there waiting, which sometimes can happen, what's a way that they can get a hold of you or attempt to get a hold of you so that you know to go look at the waiting room? That is a strategy I have seen some people employ. Okay, require a passcode when
Mark,
scheduling. Oh, yes.
Can I ask a question about that? I hear there's a doorbell, which
There
would
is.
be helpful to me, because once I see kids, that waiting room isn't on my mind at all. So how do we do the doorbell?
That'll actually be, I'll show you the setting for that here, but operating the doorbell is in the next session. And I'll actually go through some tips in the next session of how to turn off the waiting room when your class is in session and use the doorbell. So stick around at 11:45 if you've got some time. Okay, require a passcode when scheduling new meetings. This is an automatically scheduled passcode or password. I highly recommend leaving this on as well. ever really talk about the personal meeting or instant meeting IDs. We don't typically use those. You don't have a webinar, and we don't do typically the one-click join. If you do a one-click join type of meeting, and I'll show that in the next session, I would just leave this on. The one I would not have on is require passcode for participants joining by phone. So if you've ever had a student or someone else, because their connection on their internet is so bad or they're somewhere else, they have had to join by a phone, like call into the meeting, it's just extra difficult. If they have to call in to actually have to put in a password, just makes it more difficult. I suggest just leaving this off. Only authenticated users can join meetings. We'll go over this when we schedule a meeting at the end, but this, you definitely want this on. So just leave that one on, and don't worry about the web client thing. So those are just like general security settings that kind of I recommend, but you can change those when you set up a meeting. This next set of settings is specific to when you are scheduling your meeting. And again, these are just default settings. You can toggle them once you're in a particular meeting setup. I have my default settings set so that the host video and the participants video is off when people start the meeting or join the meeting. I consider this a courtesy setting so that somebody isn't surprised with their camera on in their face when they're coming to join your meeting, okay? I recommend allowing people to choose when to turn their cameras on, yourself included. Like when you're starting your meeting, you don't want to all of a sudden be in front of everybody when you're not quite prepared either. Okay. Audio type, telephone and computer audio, just leave it on that. It's the most versatile. So if somebody's really having a problem with their computer, they can at least call in on the phone number. Join before host. This is a tricky one. A lot of what I talk about here, I'll equate to a physical classroom, that your Zoom space is kind of like your physical classroom. This is the equivalent of leaving your classroom door unlocked and letting your students in before you're there. A lot of people would not be comfortable with that. However, if it was other staff and you're having a staff meeting in your classroom, probably totally fine. So again, this is allowing people to join your meeting before you as the host are there, okay? Again, I would probably not turn that on with students. The waiting room stops that. The waiting room does stand in the way of that. So even if this is on, students can't get in and start interacting with each other if you have the waiting room turned on. If the waiting room is off and this is on, then they can be in the meeting by themselves without you before you're there, okay? Enable personal meeting ID. Not going to touch on that too much. Any of these personal meeting pieces. Mute participants upon entry. This is another courtesy setting that I consider. So I always have this on so that when people come into a meeting, their microphone isn't on, or hot mic, or whatever you want to call it. I think we've all been in meetings where you jump in and somebody's got something going on in the background that's super loud and distracting. If this is not on, they join the meeting with their mic live. And again, that could be distracting. So I just always recommend keeping this on so that people choose, or you as the host choose, when people should unmute their microphones. Upcoming meeting reminder, don't worry about that too much. I think we could use Google Calendar for this. And those are just kind of your meeting settings. When you go through scheduling a meeting, those are the default settings that are there. Again, you can toggle those things. The next set is when you are actually in the meeting. And there's a basic set of settings here, and then there's an advanced set. The basic set is pretty straightforward. This third-party endpoint encryption thing, just leave this on. That's a hacking setting, so just don't mess with that one. Leave that one on. Chat. Should everybody be able to have chat? This is a setting that you can toggle while the meeting is going. Okay, so this doesn't have to be set permanently here. You can say, yes, chat is fine, but when you start your meeting, you can turn it off. Okay. This box, though, prevent participants from saving chat. If you've been in a meeting where there's like a ton of chat going in the chat box, that kind of stuff, if this isn't checked, anybody would be able to save that as a text file. And I have been in some sessions with middle school kids, and they love the chat. Like, they love the chat, and they put the most ridiculous stuff in the chat. So I would probably prevent them from saving that chat Just a recommendation. And having been a 6th grade teacher, I know exactly where they're coming from. So yeah, I would suggest having this checked. Allowing private chat. Again, this is another one that you can change on the fly, but I would probably not recommend that students have the ability to private chat each other. But adults, probably not a big deal. So I'm mostly in adult meetings, so mine's on. It's a choice you can make. Auto-saving chats. This is something I don't do. If you had this on, the second you close your session, a text file of your own chat would be saved to your computer. Okay, so it's a personal choice. Sound notification when someone joins or leaves. Melinda, this is it. This is your doorbell. All right. So I have mine off, but this is another setting that you can toggle while the meeting is going. And I think, people who really get used to Zoom may actually turn this on and off a number of times while the meeting is going, depending on the situation. So this is just a default setting. Again, this can be changed while the meeting is going. File transfer is a way that you can, like an email attachment, you can send files through the chat to the people in the chat or a particular person in the chat. I don't have this on because we have other ways of doing that, whether that's email or sharing a doc through Google Drive or something like that. We have better tools for this as opposed to using Zoom to be the mechanism to share those files. Feedback to Zoom is not anything we really need to worry about. End of meeting feedback survey, not really. This is all stuff for Zoom corporate itself, like feedback tools. Co-host, you probably do want to have this on. And while you can schedule a co-host when you set up a meeting, you can also assign a co-host while the meeting is going. And I'll show that in the next session, but I would recommend having this on. A co-host is not the full host. There can only be one host in a meeting, but you can have many co-hosts. And the co-hosts have an expanded Zoom toolbar. They have more tools to use with the participants, i.e. your students in that session. Polling. Polling is a way that you can ask questions and get multiple choice feedback to those questions really quickly in the session. This has to be on before you start your meeting. This is one of those settings that has to be on for it to appear. And only the host is the person who can do the polling. Only the host. Co-hosts cannot operate. Co-hosts can turn the polls on and off, but only the host can create and write the poll, if that makes sense. So they're the only ones who can make the questions. The co-host can turn the poll on. Okay. Always show meeting control toolbar. That's that band that has like participants and things like that on it. That's a choice that you can make. I'm not going to worry about showing Zoom windows during the screen share. Screen sharing. So like I'm doing right now, I am sharing my screen, and this is another security setting. So who can share? Only the host or all participants? This is another toggle switch while your meeting is going. By default, I have mine set for host only. That means that if the 6 of you were in a meeting with me and I had it set to host only, one of you couldn't grab the screen and start sharing whatever they wanted. That was one of the problems with Zoom bombing at the beginning, is an unsavory character would get into a meeting and immediately share inappropriate materials to the screen. So by having it at host only, you control who actually has the ability to share their screen. During the meeting at any time, you can flip it over to all participants, and then your students can share if they're sharing out some work or something like that. And then you can always toggle it back to lock them out of it again. So this is just a default setting. I would not worry about this one. Annotation and whiteboard are different ways of sharing the screen. So annotation, and there'll be a session on this, I think it's tomorrow. If you are sharing your screen and you allow annotation, your students could write on the screen. They could start drawing on the screen. They could start marking up the screen, which can be valuable or not valuable. So it's a setting you need to be aware of. Whiteboard is another setting of type of shared screen, but this is a shared screen directly out of Zoom. So when you go to share your screen, there's a whiteboard option there, and it shares out just a blank white screen, and you and the others, depending on how you manage it, can draw, write, do whatever you want in that whiteboard. Sounds awesome. Sounds like a great way to use a whiteboard with your students, but if you've ever tried to draw anything with a mouse or a trackpad, it is not the easiest thing in the world. So just forewarned, if you want to go that route, play with it first. Practice with it, figure out the tools before you go into a live session with your kids, because it could be a disaster if you're not prepared for something like that. Okay? Remote control. You don't need this on, and it actually doesn't work with Chromebooks anyway. I have it on because, I'll be honest, I provide tech support for people. I have a personal Zoom account and it's on, and it's how I provide tech support to my parents. So I can take over their computer with it this way. Nonverbal feedback. If you click your participants button and it pops up a window of all of us that are here, and you can do that now if you want to, you will see a series of little buttons across the bottom of our participants list that say like yes, no, go slower, go faster, more, those things. That's nonverbal feedback. And you could choose to use this with your students so that they don't have to speak to you and interrupt you. You could say, are we ready to move on? Am I going too fast? You know, whatever. And they could use these little buttons to give you feedback while you're going so that you really kind of keep your pace, or, you know, you don't want to lose steam in a lesson or something like that. So you do have those nonverbal feedback options there. I would recommend having this on. The meeting reactions one is, honestly, it's kind of silly. It's on in this session. You can go down in your toolbar and go to meeting reactions. Where is that? I don't have it because I think I'm the host. But it gives you like a thumbs up or a clapping, and it shows up on your actual video window as something that people can see. Maybe you want to use it. Now, allow removed participants to rejoin, and allow participants to rename themselves. These are really important ones to pay attention to, okay? Removing a student from your session is the equivalent of sending them to the principal's office or kicking them out of class, okay? So if you remove, and that's the term Zoom uses, if you remove somebody from the session and this is on, they can join right back again, which is kind of not the point, right? This is really one of those, I've identified a really disruptive person or potentially a Zoom bomber, and I want them out and I do not want them back. So if this is off and you remove a user from your session, they will not be able to rejoin your Zoom meeting. They are forbidden to come back to that particular Zoom meeting, okay? If you are using the waiting room, you can put them back in the waiting room until you choose to let them back in. That's probably a better strategy for dealing with somebody that you know is legitimately one of your students, but is just causing all sorts of problems. You can put them in the waiting room instead of removing them from the meeting, which they can't get back into then. There's another thing when we do the breakout rooms one that a teacher brought to my attention of a way you can kind of do this timeout type of thing with breakout rooms. It's even more effective, and I go through it in that session. Okay. Allow participants to rename themselves. This is an option that you can turn off and on while the meeting is going. And if you turn it on, a student or anybody can go in and change their display name. Now you may be thinking, why would I do that? Depending on your authentication settings, if you don't require an authentication setting to use the district's accounts, they may come in, or very likely may come in with a parent's name, a sibling's name, a nickname, or whatever it is, something that doesn't make any sense. And if you're in that situation, you could say, I'm going to give everybody 3 minutes to fix their names so that I recognize who you are. Or even if you are using authentication, that's an official name that comes out of Skyward, and a lot of kids don't go by that. So you may choose for 3 minutes to allow, or 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is, for the students to fix their own names in a way that they want to be seen on the screen. Now, why the toggle is so important, again, having taught 6th grade, I would never leave this on the whole time, because all the kids would do the whole time is change their name over and over and over, progressively getting more ridiculous. I know this because I would do that too. That's just me. So, and Margie is our department assistant here, and she knows exactly what I just said is true. So, yeah, Carrie.
Can I fix their names for them?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's in the next meeting. I'll show you how to do that in the next meeting, or the next session. Okay. Hide participant profile pictures in a meeting. If I was to turn my camera off, where's my stuff? Right now, you see my picture, right? If that is turned on, you would not see anybody's personal profile pictures. All you would see is their name. So it's just a choice. Okay, in meetings. So these are the advanced settings. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll do some. Reporting participants to Zoom is if you do get a Zoom bomber in your session, you can report that particular user to Zoom so that they can get a record and potentially kick that person out or block them from joining a Zoom session. Please don't do this. Our accounts and our students, if you're using authentication, we don't want our student accounts to get blocked. That would be bad. Okay, breakout rooms is a big one. People always want to know about the breakout rooms, and there's a whole session dedicated to just breakout rooms. This does need to be on before you start your meeting for you to be able to manage breakout rooms, and only the host can do the breakout rooms, not the co-host, just the host, okay? Remote support, don't need to talk about that. Closed captioning, I only mentioned because you will see it as an option if you turn it on and you're thinking, oh, I can have automated closed captioning for my session. How awesome. Not yet. The only way closed captioning works with Zoom is if you use a third party who comes in and has a live transcription person available. We pay for that for board meetings. We have a person who sits there and does the captions. Otherwise, it's not automated, so don't let that fool you. Virtual background. The virtual background is a way that I'm not sitting in front of a virtual background. This is actually a thing on my wall. But you can sometimes, depending on your computer level, put a virtual background behind you. The students cannot do this with Chromebooks. If they are on a PC or a Mac, depending on the processor level of that machine, they can. It can be distracting. It can also be fun. It's totally up to you what you would want to do with that. Video filters is new, and I haven't even had a chance to play with this yet, so I don't know if it's like what those video filters are. Don't worry about identifying guests, auto answer, any of these things. I would not worry about them at all. Okay. Those are good. Okay, the only other thing before we schedule a meeting, and I'm running a little over, I think I'm a little long-winded today, is in the settings area for recording. If you go to the recording area here, you have a bunch of different options for recording, okay? And one of those is hosts can give participants the permission to record locally. This would mean that if you had this turned on and you gave permission to your students to, what you'd be giving is permission to your students to record the session. Don't do that. Don't give them the ability to record their own session. That's bad idea, bad idea. You would actually see it as the host. You would see a record symbol come up next to their name and you could stop it, but just don't even give them that option, okay? Now under cloud recording, and this does apply, well, this is how you can record just your shared screen, okay? So you have a bunch of different recording options here, but you definitely want to choose one that says record active speaker, gallery view, and shared screen separately. It saves them as separate files. And you could uncheck these and just say, all I think I want is the shared screen. And that way you're not recording the student gallery at all, okay? So that's probably my recommendation right there. I do other things with recording, so I have active speaker on. Yeah, that's the only thing I really wanted to point out, other than that recording disclaimer that you heard at the beginning of this session. That's at the very bottom here where you can turn that on or off, okay? I'm at 30 minutes, but we do have one more thing to do, and I wanted to walk everybody through scheduling a meeting now with those settings, okay? So if we go back to the meetings, under personal here, we go back to meetings, and we're in our meetings area where it shows upcoming, previous, and all those things. Over here on the side is a button that says schedule a meeting. And if you click schedule a meeting, this will take you to the meeting scheduling area. And it's pretty straightforward. You give it a topic. Obviously, I've done Mark's test meeting a number of times. You could save these settings as a template if you're going to do the same thing over and over, of which I have. I have a bunch of templates in here, and if I pick a template, it just preloads all those options I put in, but I'm not going to do that right now. So title, if you want to put an optional description in, you can. The date of the meeting. So I'm going to say it's on the 29th at 1 is fine. What's the duration? It's 30 minutes. The trick with the time, just to point out though, is it only does it in half-hour increments. Okay, so if you look at this, it doesn't give you the ability to actually enter a custom time. So if you have something that's starting at, let's say 1:15, set the meeting for 1 o'clock. You can start it late, you can start it early, it can run past the time that it says it's supposed to end. You're totally fine with that. What you do is just make sure to communicate the actual start time with the people who are joining your meeting. Okay. You can make this a recurring meeting. So kind of like a recurrence where it's on a calendar every week on this date or every month. I also found out something really interesting yesterday. I didn't know this. You can do a no fixed time recurring meeting. And a no fixed time recurring meeting would just use the same link of this meeting whenever you want. You just send out that link again, and there's no actual time affixed to this meeting. It's just basically a way you can permanently use the same meeting over and over and over again on a non-fixed schedule. Interesting. Meeting ID, I would highly recommend leaving this on generate automatically. This is the 11-digit meeting ID. In this case, this is a 10-digit. It's either, I think it's like 9 to 11. This is basically my personal meeting ID. This never changes. And if I use this over and over again, this meeting ID could be kind of like my phone number and get out in the wild, and people could try to join my session maliciously by getting this number. So I like to generate an automatic meeting ID so it's never the same. Passcode. If you have this on, it generates an automatic passcode for you that's a number, but you can use a word. You can put in your own passcode if you want. And waiting room. Do you want the waiting room on or off when the meeting begins? You can toggle that once the meeting is going, right? And on September 27th, you have to have one or the other or both on, okay? When the meeting starts, video on or off for the host and participant, audio, telephone, computer, or both. Now the meeting options down here are really critical, okay? Because these will change depending on your audience. So enable join before host is your locked door option, all right? If it's staff, turn it on. If it's not staff, leave it off. Mute participants upon entry. I don't really care who that is, just I think it's a courtesy setting. Only authenticated users can join. If you check this box, I think all you have is the option for staff and students. This forces anybody who's coming into your session to be logged into their OSD account, forced to be, okay? I know that this is a problem for younger kids because their parents are trying to help them get in. For older kids, not a big deal. Everybody just needs to go through the portal, and click on that Zoom link, and then they're logged into their OSD Zoom account. Super easy to say that, and super easy for older kids. Not so easy for our little kids and their families. And I'll point one thing out at the very end here of how to help them with that. But doing this forces their actual names to come forward. No anonymity, no way to disguise themselves. So that's the big plus here, is you're only getting people we have given accounts to. Breakout room pre-assigned, we talk about that in the breakout room session. Automatically record meeting, not necessarily something we need to talk about here. And if you already know that you're gonna have a co-teacher or a para or somebody you're going to assign as a co-host in your session, you can do it ahead of time right here. Click save, and this will take you to your meeting summary. So these are all of the things that you have set for your meeting, date, time. Here is your new particular meeting ID related to this session. So this is something that is the particular unique code for this meeting. You can use the Google Calendar button here to put it directly into your Google Calendar. You always have to go through this step. Yes, allow. And it makes the whole calendar event for you with the link. If this is, again, to work with other peers and staff members, you could then share this with them and it would put the event on their calendars as well with the Zoom link included. Okay, this is a great place that if you are not actually, if I scheduled this for 1 o'clock, but the meeting is actually at 1:15, I can change the time here, even though the meeting itself is scheduled for 1 o'clock. Okay. When you are done, oh, also, this is the invite link. If you wanted to copy this, you could just email that to somebody. If you wanted the full invitation that has all the phone numbers and everything in it as well, that's the link over here that says copy invitation. If you click that link, it opens up this window and you can click this button that says copy meeting invitation. And it just copies to the clipboard all the stuff, which you can then paste into an email and send out to whomever you want, or through Skyward Message Center or whatever. Your summary of meeting settings are here. If you did have polling on and you wanted to make polls ahead of time instead of while the meeting is going, you can do that here under add and set up your polls ahead of time. There's a whole session we'll do on polling. You can delete this meeting at this place. You can delete it on that meeting screen as well. And you can save this meeting as a template. So if this was a particular meeting with the title that you know you're going to do over and over again, all you're going to be doing is changing the date and the time, but all the settings that you've custom done in here will be the same. You can save this as a template, and then you don't have to put all that stuff in over and over again. You just pick it from the list and change your date and time. If you need to go back in and tweak a couple of things, well, let me point this out. If you're back in the meetings tab, we now see Mark's test meeting, which is here. I can click on the link. It takes me back into the summary screen. And I can also go back into edit this meeting here. And now I can go back in and change those settings if I did something wrong. If I feel good about it, back on this meeting tab, it's time to start the meeting. I can log into my Zoom. I can see the session here. If I mouse over it, I can start it here, or I can edit it here again. Or if you're in the meeting itself, you can start that meeting from this place as well. Okay, I went for 40 minutes. That was a lot. So, and we got to get the next session going here. So any questions before we wrap this up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a 9th grader and she has a Chromebook, and I was wondering if I can just play around and practice with her with the Zoom.
Yes.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, should be totally
So
fine.
that way I can get familiar with it, and she needs to get familiar with it too. So I thought that would be a good way to practice before school.
Yeah, yep, that's fine. I always throw out another offer too. If any of you are feeling nervous or uncomfortable about this, shoot me an email if I'm free. I'll happily jump on a Zoom with you if you want to practice the tools, and I can kind of talk you through it. My schedule's kind of nuts right now. We have a lot going on.
Yeah.
But, I'm happy to help out if necessary as well.
I just feel like I haven't built a bunch of confidence with going on it, and so I feel like I should just do that with her, and then I'll be like, oh, this is no big deal. I just haven't really done that yet, and so I should just jump in it and just start doing it.
Zoom is pretty intuitive, I'll say that, and just spending time there, running a couple meetings, maybe the first couple are a little clumsy, but you'll figure out the tools pretty quickly.
Well, she's in 9th grade. She's pretty quick at this. She's probably going to be quicker than me even, because, we've started giving kids Chromebooks when they're young, and so now they're like, so she can kind of help me, and I can help her, and, it will just go really good, I think, that way.
Yeah.
Yep. But anyway, that was the only question I had.
Yeah, Chromebooks are a little different too, right? So Chromebooks are a little less featured because they don't truly have the Zoom app. And I know Zoom's working on it, but they are a little lower level. Not everything works exactly the same. So.
Okay. All right. I'm good.
Okay. Am I going to see you all in 5 minutes?
Yes.
Most of you?
Yep.
All right. Perfect. I got to take a phone call, and I'll be there in just a second.